Very good morning to you all. I had yesterday was a nice day with a lot of academic stimulating lectures and interactions. This is a very proud moment for me to be here to introduce to you, my guru, my guide, Professor Janak Pandey. But before that, I have with me Professor Anup Singh, who is also has been a student of Professor Janak Pandey, and he is now Director General of Nirma University. So I thought it is his prerogative, and it will be right in right order to for him to introduce Professor Janak Pandey here. And I'll invite Professor Anup Singh to talk about his work for a few minutes, and then to introduce Professor Janak Pandey to all of you. And Professor Pandey will be talking about his recent work on nature and dynamics of social influence, interpersonal and organizational context. But I won't be in between you and Professor Janak Pandey and Professor Anup Singh. Welcome, sir. Please come.
Thank you. Good morning, Professor Pandey, Professor Tripathi, and learned scholars who have come here. My name is, as Urmi said, Anup Singh. She said that I have to talk about myself, right? I will do that. I had my initial training from University of Allahabad, and there was this advanced center of national development. So psychology was very different in this country in comparison to the United States, where they explored anything and everything. In India, probably my department was very conscious that psychology has to be in the context of social issues. So that's where I learned about intergroup relations. And that problem was there at that time, and that problem is there even today. There we learn about deprivation and psychology, and I did my PhD in psychology, and also culture. Because somehow we felt that just like biology and physics, psychology would be universal. And in my department, we said, look, human behavior is affected by society and cultures. So we have to take, the findings of psychology with a pinch of salt. Another thing that I learned, that a psychologist has to be very good in methodology, right? Because unless you are taking your methodology very seriously and using it with the rigor, your findings would not be acceptable, and they would not be reproducible. So I just read one article in Education World, which is published from Boston, that 90% of experiments in psychology are not able to be reproduced. So there is something wrong which is going on. Either it may be related to methodology, or it may be related to something else. And the third thing that I learned, that psychology has to integrate with other disciplines. So Professor Tripathi is here, Professor Pandey is here. We used to have people from English department. We used to have people from sociology department. We used to have people from Urdu, Hindi, and we could see psychology from a new perspective. In fact, when I did my PhD in area of poverty, I read Premchand very carefully, because you keep all the research of psychology on one side, and you keep Kafan of Premchand on the other side, and insights from both are equal. So that's what I learned. And very soon after doing my PhD, I moved into management. So, I do more work in area of management than in mainstream psychology. So many of you would not know me. I'm very fortunate that I have this opportunity to introduce Professor Pandey, right? So Professor Pandey, I have to also think of two other professors, Professor J.B.P. Sinha, who was a cross-cultural psychologist, a social psychologist, and Professor Pandey worked very closely with him, and Professor Durganand Sinha, who brought him from IIT Kanpur to Allahabad, right? So he had worked with two great professors, and when he came to Allahabad, then he became part of the department's culture and did some wonderful work. And among other works, he worked in area of social influence, Machiavellianism, Ingratiation, and they were very, very useful in the context of Indian society. Professor Pandey is a PhD from Kansas State University, and then he was also a visiting scholar at the University of Manitoba, Wake Forest University, and East-West Center at Hawaii. Then he was a professor of psychology for more than 3 decades at psychology department, and he was also vice chancellor of Central Bihar University, and then he has done some wonderful books, right? So among others, we had this survey of psychology in India. So he edited that, and then he also edited Psychology in India, State of Art, Revisited, and then he also edited the Handbook of Cross-Cultural Psychology, Psychology, Education and Training, a Global Perspective, Psychological Perspective on Diversity and Social Development. And his latest book is Nature and Dynamics of Social Influence. So with this small introduction, I would not like to be between Professor Pandey and you. Professor Pandey, over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Anup Singh, and thank you to Professor Urmi Biswas for generous introduction and giving me this opportunity. I have been allotted 45 minutes. Now this is 11:15, so I will finish at 11:30. I have to first share my story with you. When I was a graduate student at Kansas State, as graduate students have to pass comprehensive examination, I was most of the time in library to update my knowledge at that time, the way status of social psychology was, and came across a book on Ingratiation by Edward Jones, one of the founding father of scientific social psychology. You all must know his contribution. I read the book. I did not leave the library till I finish it. It is not a very long book, published in 1964. I was reading it in sometime late 1972. And then related it with my own growing up in a deprived village, in a family of large family, myself being the 9th child of my parents, and experiencing a scarcity and adapting myself to live in that kind of context. The village being remote, no connectivity by efficient road or train, and all kind of a struggle. And then I also recall that how I reached to Ranchi, went to Jila school, got admitted and started experiencing urban setup with my deprived background and my experience to live in scarcity and poverty. All those experiences helped me, and I nurtured the ideas that this is something must be studied. I also started looking around the way people behave, the way they try to manipulate, influence others. They may try to get things which they don't deserve, and all kind of activities, observing and trying to put it in psychological framework continued my interest. My doctoral thesis was not on this topic, but this remained a nurtured ideas. Came back to return home and joined IIT Kanpur Humanities Social Science Department. And on first opportunity, I gave a seminar on these ideas and tried to articulate a kind of paradigm for the research. The comments were not very encouraging. Generally, those who are not psychologists, they came up with a comment, what is to understand about it? These are all very obvious things which happen. Submitted a project to ICSR. The project was reviewed well, but in the project, somewhere there was a term, behavioral bribe. And so ICSR wrote back, there is no bribe in emergency. How come you are going to study bribe? So the project was rejected on that ground. Well, in any case, I started doing my work and did some studies on this topic, which was a little difficult and discouraging in the beginning, and have continued on this topic. And some of my friends who joined me as at master or PhD level for their thesis, they also worked on this area. So this has a long journey. This has been a long journey on this topic, and I'm going to narrate that briefly. It will not be a complete description of it, and share you some salient features of it. But what is this social influence? If you think this is the core of social behavior, as soon as we meet someone, as soon as in morning we prepare to go to office or for some meeting, we are very conscious how we are going to interact, how we are going to impact in the meeting, how we are going to influence others. When we are in organizational context, we all the time are very conscious about our successful way of dealing with people and working with them. Two kinds of influence are not included in this research program. One, brute force, violence, and other is corruption. I think these are crude methods of influencing and impacting others to gain some favor. So let me proceed. Which one? Okay. Yes. We influence others' perception. We influence their thinking, their thoughts, their feeling, and we also try to influence that they should act as I wish or we wish. This is common in our social life, in business, in all kinds of context. People plan for it. They work out how to influence other person, because the purpose will differ and also the target person will differ. So you have to keep that in mind. Yes, it does not work. Wait, this one, this one, this one, this. No? Okay. Now, let me briefly share the examples of social influence in history. All these people from Chanak, Machiavelli, Hitler, Mahatma Gandhi, Martin Luther King, Nelson Mandela, they have impacted and influenced people at the mass level. So we have such kind of examples. The other examples you can think of in medieval period, in ancient period, the way it was expected by the people who will come to the court before the king and the ruler, and the kind of behavior they have to do. Not only that, there were professional people in the court to please the king. The famous Prithviraj Raso, which is in poetic form, was a tradition followed during the medieval and ancient period. The similar thing continued during the Mughal period. They were very meticulous. What will be the distance of the other person who is going to meet the king, and what kind of behavior he must reflect. The Britishers further formalized that how the subject should behave with them. And after the Britishers were gone, I think we also inherited that tradition, that what kind of behavior should be, and that has led to a kind of culture in our social context, and a very common term used is chamchagiri. That's a but psychophancy has been studied by sociologists and others, and they have tried to relate the way such kind of behavior lead to poor decision making and poor productivity, particularly the quality of administration and quality of social life. In sociology tradition, I think I have a long list, and I just want to mention the name: Libon, Tarde, George Mead, Max Weber, and lately Goffman, whose work has been widely cited on face work. That tradition has influenced a study of social influence. In social psychology tradition, we have the first experiment which we try to teach to our intro social psychology students, triplet, Allport, and Allport experiment was successfully repeated by Professor N. Sen Gupta and C.P.N. Singh, that how presence of others influence productivity and activity of others. Sharif, autokinetic phenomena, well-known phenomena, Ash conformity research, and then just opposite of conformity, research by French social psychologist Machiavelli, that it is just not the majority influences the minority. The influence of minority is of equal importance. As a matter of fact, active minority are greater source of change than the majority and all that. In 80s, work of Cialdini has been of great interest, and I will come back to his work as I move. Now, the socio-cultural context is very important, and it critically determines nature of human social interaction and influence. Socio-cultural context constitutes socio-economic political systems, tradition, social norms, values, and all kinds of situational characteristics. So when we are trying to understand social influence, we have to understand the social context in which we are trying to understand social influence. The other variable is related to personality. I think I will mention work related to Machiavellianism, particularly done by Professor Tripathi and all that. Now, Indian society is unique in terms of its social structure, hierarchy, traditional norms, and values. What is important is that hierarchy guides our core functioning in social setup. There has been quite a bit of work by Professor J.V.P. Sinha, work by Professor Jyoti Verma. She is present here on social values. But the core thing is that hierarchy makes a lot of difference. Then hierarchy implies many things, and that implies consenting to the authority. It implies conforming to the authorities, agreeing to the senior, and flattering to the authority to extract some resources. And sometimes, if you are actor in the process, then you may not deserve, but by following these kind of behavior, you may please the authority and may get some reward which you may not necessarily deserve. Well, scarcity is another factor in the context. When resources are particularly seen as limited, then people think there is a lack of opportunities, so they engage in such behavior which influences the authority and that way one get the reward. So a scarcity mindset in our context is quite important. That lead to manipulating the situation in favor and using such kind of strategies and practices. Now, there are a number of questions which psychologists have to answer. I will move forward, otherwise I will not be able to finish in time. Attitude change research gives us a lot of ideas to understand our influence processes. The person who is acting to influence or the actor in that episode or context uses all kinds of practices to change the attitude of the target person or authority who is holding the resources. The attitude research is full of contradiction, and there has been a lot of discussion on consistency between attitude and actual behavior. I will not go into that detail, but we try to change others' attitude. An attempt is made so that the other person is influenced, and the process of could be understood in terms of various theories of attitude change, cognitive theories, and reinforcement theories. But what is important here is the person who is attempting to influence tries to arouse affective state of positive kind in the target person. Once the mood state of the target person gets manipulated and the authority or the target person gets into a situation of positive mood state, that person becomes very vulnerable, and that leads a kind of tendency in him to reward the actor. And that's the way when we try to understand attitude change, we also need to also understand affective state, mood state, and the way mood state is manipulated. Individual differences to personality traits are very significant. Authoritarian personality and Machiavellianism. The other factor, social norms and influence, we need to understand that. Social norms, one aspect of the norm that you ought to act in a particular way, and that expectation comes from the social norm. And this, as we proceed, I will try to relate it with this behavior. Self-presentation and impression management is another important aspect. The way one presents oneself, self-presentation is purposive, Self-presentation facilitates social interactions. Self-presentation helps to gain some benefits and rewards. Self-presentation is used in self-construction framework, and self-presentation is used to impress the other person or influencing that target. Self-presentation has been widely studied, and people differ in their style. There has been another variable related to self, and that is self-monitoring. Some people are very high on self-monitoring, some are low, and that determine their behavior in the context. Now, the tactices which are used in impression management related to including self-presentation, the most widely known strategy tactics is ingratiation. It could be intimidation. It could be self-promotion, exemplification, presenting oneself having all positive qualities, supplication, presenting oneself as dependent, needy, and using all kinds of behavioral skill, including humility. You try to be humble, polite to influence. All these tactices help in the process of impression management. Well, particularly we have studied ingratiation in somewhat detail. The most well-known tactics in Western literature, you find other enhancement, conformity, self-enhancement. But in our work, we also found that the actor, the ingratiator, also uses self-depreciation, uses dependency instrumentally, that I am dependent on you, no one can help me, that kind of approach. Showing one connection that I am well connected, name dropping, changing with the demand of the situation. As the situation changes, one also changes the way to approach the target, and sometimes rendering favors, giving some presents, some gifts, thinking that the gift will not go west, it will get some way rewarded. So basically, ingratiation is to get oneself more attracted. It is for self-enhancement. But ingratiator is always in dilemma, whether it will work or it will not work. Well, before ingratiating, the ingratiator must resolve that dilemma. These three factors incentive value, what for you are trying to impress and influence someone, what for you are trying to make efforts, and the value of your object, value of your goal becomes the most critical factor. Then the second factor, subjective probability of success. If my approach to ingratiate and influence is not going to work out, why I should indulge in it? So the ingratiator and actor is a social strategist. And when he decides that this social strategy will work, then only he indulges in that. The third factor, which Western researchers found very important, and that is perceived legitimacy. Whether the particular behavior I am going to indulge is legitimate, normative, or it is going to be very deviant. If it is not legitimate, then it may bounce back. So that fear may be there. Actor tactics may vary according to the target. Some of the tactics I shared with you. Okay. There is other factor, the ingratiator. As a matter of fact, the actor is trying to gain power through ingratiation. If actor succeeds in influencing the target person, the authority, and gain the reward which he or she did not deserve, then what is happening? In that episode, the powerful person who has to give the reward becomes powerless. And the ingratiator, the actor, gains the power. The target, however, keeps on thinking that he continues to be powerful, and that power he feels due to his positive mood state, which has been successfully manipulated by the ingratiator. There is another perspective, bystander perspective. Those who are looking at actors' behavior, those who are looking at the episodes, they laugh at the situation because they are able to objectively assess the situation. Now, Jones and Wortman suggested this equation, that this is what happens in the Western context. IV is ingratiating behavior. IV is perceived incentive value of the reward one is trying to get. And PS is subjective probability of success. And LB is legitimacy or illegitimacy of behavior. Jones and his colleagues suggest that ingratiating behavior is the outcome of interactive effect of IV and PS. But if legitimacy of behavior is not there, this behavior will not occur. Okay? So legitimacy of behavior becomes a critical factor. This has been their position. Now in our work, and particularly Kayum Ali Baura, who worked on this topic in early 80s, according to his data, Legitimacy of behavior is not a critical factor in our context. And the context, as I discussed with you in the beginning, hierarchical authoritarian setup where consenting, conforming is the norm. Legitimacy of behavior is not a kind of factor which determines yes or no. Generally, it is a further additive factor. I think it is highly situationally valid data. There could be the context where legitimacy factor becomes important. What Jones and others have suggested will hold. There are n number of issues related to Machiavellianism. It is an acquired trait, as we know. Whether Mac ingratiate more or less. Mac are very good strategists. They will decide whether to ingratiate or not ingratiate according to assessment of their situation and context. Do high Mac lie more than low Mac? That is also on a strategy, but tendency is that they tend to lie more. They are one thing does not work on them, and that is the moral appeal. Machiavellianism, they make their strategy in competitive situation. They are high on parody and lobbying. And Machiavellians are high on manipulative behavior in general. There is another line of research, and that is related to persuasion and compliance. And I just briefly try to mention here, reciprocation has been traditionally a widespread tactics to influence others. People reciprocate, they influence by reciprocating. So if you want to gain favor from someone, the best strategy is that you do a favor to that person and then the favor will return back. Commitment to consistency. If your thoughts and attitudes are of one kind, then behavior will be also consistent according to thoughts and ideas. So if you influence thoughts and ideas, you can also find change at behavioral level. People provide social proof. All the time we carry a lot of proof baggage to influence others, by oneself, by others. Liking, I think you express liking and you expect liking from others. The scarcity has its own role. It is well known as strategy by the marketing managers that they create artificial shortage to get their sale on a high scale. Lately, unity has been identified as the most critical factor in influencing in our social life. And unity has been used as a strategy by mass leader, even uh, um, big leaders like Mahatma Gandhi and all that, the unity factor was used. Unity is used in family to keep the family intact. Unity is used in community to keep the community intact and become more influential. I must move faster. I will just skip and then finally put the social influence dimensions under three categories. Hard influence. The hard influence has these dimensions: intimidation, veiled threat, some kind of bully, not actually physical violence, but there are subtle ways to do that. Disparagement, this is quite common in institutional setup. Authority, assertiveness, coalition formation. These tactics are used in social and organizational context, more so in organizational context. Rational influence, exchange of benefit. I will do this and you will do that for me. Logical reasoning, you reason out to win someone, to influence someone. And of course, consultative tactics. Let us talk about it. Let us resolve it. Soft influence, exemplification. You set examples. Ethnic identity, quite common. We know the way identity is manipulated in political context in our social situation. And ingratiation, of course, I have discussed with you. And supplication, presenting oneself as helpless. The reason I mentioned that these three constitute social influence scale, which we developed as part of this project. I think at group level, social influence phenomena is just drawing your attention. Well-known phenomena like groupthink, that how when people are too cohesive, they do not see many options and they become victim of the group situation. Group shift, risky shift research is known that as a group you take higher risk, de-individuation, and social loafing. When in the group people work together, they try to save their energy, and that kind of phenomena is also inclusive in social influence. When we try to understand social change, that is also influence process. And as I mentioned earlier, Muscovy work, particularly active minority, the way active minority can be the source of major societal level changes. This is the book which reports this research program. Came out a few months back, and the Springer people probably are displaying it here. Now, the major outcome of this research is, which I would like to share, that influencing could be positive it could have dark side. It could have dark side in the sense that influencing at the cost of keeping people less informed, keeping people, manipulating people to agree for something which is wrong, influencing at mass level could be used to give the society a particular course which is not desirable, and therefore it has larger implication. I will stop here. Thank you very much. Is there any question?
Does anyone have any questions here? Okay, we have one question. Since we're out of time, there are time constraints. We will only be able to take one question, sir.
Who has the question?
Are questions allowed or not?
To you.
No. I don't want any special favors. Is it allowed?
Generally, we don't move keynote. But others he has announced, just guide an answer. It's okay.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yeah, that's quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah, please go ahead.
I had a specific question asked, which I hope is directly related to your nature and dynamics of social influence. Actually, we have seen that the degree of political propaganda that is going on. And if I may recall Professor Chomsky, he says that in democratic societies we can't directly force people. So we have to try and control what they think by controlling what they read and see and hear too, particularly in the age of social media. So what can educated individuals do to become more aware of the insidious nature of misinformation, propaganda, half-truths, manipulation? Like you mentioned ethnic pride. I mean, that's probably very relevant for India. If not say anything, but thank you.
Sharing of knowledge helps a lot, not only at individual level, but also at mass level. When media, social media, or in public speaking, people try to arouse the emotion, then what they are trying to do is to block critical thinking of the people. They are trying to reduce information processing ability of the people. Okay. So in the beginning, I presented that sharing information presenting information at cognitive level helps people to make assessment. But as soon as there is a arousal, affective arousal of the mood at individual and mass level, that critical ability of individual and people is reduced. So that manipulation we need to understand. So understanding and such research and knowledge can help the individual and help at the mass level. We need to educate ourselves, need to educate people through, through the process of same social media and other processes, that what may actually can happen. Does it, I could not really, I just made a guess what you are asking. I was not able to, was that your question?
Hi, everyone. So I would like to thank Professor Janak Pandey for his keynote lecture. And I want to inform that we are having 3 invited lectures happening right now in a few moments. So right now we are having Dr. S.L. Vaya and Sanjay Kumar talking about forensic psychology in India, which is happening here in the multipurpose hall. Parallelly, we are going to have Professor Shilpa Pandit and Geshi Durji talking about Buddhist philosophy and neuropsychology. That session is happening in 113 SAS. And the third parallel session, we have Professor Rabindra Kumar and Dr. Updesh Kumar talking about organizational resilience and contemporary issues and emerging trends in military psychology. And that is happening in 004 SAS. So there are 3 sessions. I would request you to please exit the multipurpose hall if you are interested in the other 2 parallel sessions that are happening in 113 and 004 SAS.